Good evening, guys. We are here for a much awaited Facebook Live session. I'm joined here by my colleague Zinnia. Um, we are both seasoned and senior immigration advisors. We will be joined shortly, not through the live Facebook session, but we will be joined shortly in the comment session to help get through as many answers as we possibly can by our other immigration advisors as well. But I just wanted to sort of set the scene and put a disclaimer to people, before we start the session. One of the things that I want people to know is there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of speculation. I've been in the immigration industry for a good 14, 15 years, and I've never seen so much confusion and panic. And we understand that, what the reason is. There's a lot of people that are in very dire situations. But I want people to know that the session that we're doing today is actually on public demand, one. And second, we are going to be talking about things that are facts. I don't want to spend the next 45 minutes us talking about what we feel is going to happen, because that's not the information that people need, because different practitioners feel different things. We are going to talk about facts. And so we are going to take live questions. We are going to talk about changes. I think, Zinnia, do you agree that it's best to kind of start off with the changes that have been announced? Because just about an hour and a bit ago, we've been bombarded with this huge email from immigration about some changes. So should we just go through that first?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. We should go through that because, Arunima and I, we've sort of spent like the last hour just trying to read it and absorb it as well. And our entire team is on it, trying to absorb some information. But yeah, lots of changes have come through, and we really should summarize those before we start. Yeah. And chances are we're going to come back to them throughout the session anyway.
Yeah. So we will sort of take questions as we come in. And if we have in detail covered that specific question, I will sort of point you back to the question, because our goal today is to try and offer robust, no nonsense consultation, which is how I sort of market the session. We want to give you absolute factual advice, and then you can run with that advice. And we want to try and go through as many questions as we possibly can. So I think the first thing I want to tell people is just on the border exceptions. If you've been listening to any of my sessions, it's very political. I've been talking about it from the week one of lockdown, that the exceptions was always going to have a very high bar. At this stage, there's about 15,000 EOIs that have been submitted, 14,901 precisely, out of which 14,440 have been decided, but 2,800 or something have been approved. So there's about an 80% decline rate in that space. So, we always knew the threshold's really high. The decline rate is even more so higher in the essential worker space, and we will get into those details in a bit. Zina, there's about 10,000 something people stuck offshore?
Yeah, so that's what the minister said in his last interview on Tuesday, 10,000 people stranded offshore holding work visas for New Zealand.
Yeah. And at this stage, we haven't the announcements that have come through today. There are no announcements addressing any relief for those people. So just letting you know that those people that have got, job offers on hold or whatever, and you stuck offshore, and I am in a lot of these WhatsApp groups, there's so much panic. There is no relief at this stage. So status quo for your situation.
There has been some, so the immigration minister did say on Tuesday, when he had those confronting interviews, he did say that that is the next set of people they're working on. So cabinet is working on the people that are stuck offshore on work visas. That's what they're working on at the moment as we speak. So that is a high priority for immigration, but there's a lot of complexity in there. That's why the decision's not coming quickly, because as per him, it's a complex issue that they need to work through.
That's right. And I think we will try and not get too political at this stage. Like I said, the whole idea of the session is to actually make it factual, give you facts. If you ever want us to do a more political spin, I'm more than happy to do it another time. But let's save this, the next 40 minutes or so to stick to facts. So the changes that have come through recently, they talk about partners and dependents of New Zealanders only. I would put it to Zinnia to elaborate on this, but partners of New Zealanders only. I am hearing people saying that, why we can come back into the country, we stuck and there's no relief for you. So if you're a partner or a dependent of a New Zealander and you've been an ordinary resident in New Zealand, or you hold a New Zealand visa, you can then, or a dependent child visa, you can then be allowed to come into the country. but there is a process. Zinnia, please take us through the process.
So initially, the policy was, and it still is currently there. So whatever the changes are, they actually come into effect end of next week. So right now, the policy is that if you're a partner of a New Zealander, then you have to physically travel with them to cross the border. So you have to be on the same flight and you have to walk through customs together in order to be allowed entry. So they have removed this requirement to travel physically together. And what's happening is when these announcements come, like when these kick in end of next week, partners of New Zealand families, and it could be dependent children or partners of New Zealanders only, are allowed to come into the country on two conditions: that either, and they're not an and condition, they're an or condition, that either they hold a partnership-based visa already, that means their relationship has already been assessed by immigration, or they were ordinarily resident in New Zealand prior to them being stuck offshore. So they have to meet one of these two criteria. And there's still the form that has to be filled out online for border exception requests. There's still the quarantine requirements on them. None of that stuff changes.
Cool. Yeah, so that's that. So
touch upon partners of visa holders as well. So the criteria on that was, so dependents of visa holders, if they were ordinarily living in New Zealand and left the country, they've always got an exemption. They've got an exemption from quite a while ago as well. It's just, if you are a New Zealand temporary visa holder and you went to India, got married, and you got approval, but your partner's stuck there and they've never come to New Zealand, they still can't because they haven't lived in New Zealand before.
Yep. I do want to obviously take some questions and we'll talk about those, but I want to give you a quick rundown. So this change is going to come rather quickly because it doesn't require an instruction change, and we're expecting this comes about rather quickly. There are further changes. There's quite a few changes. I'm only going to talk about the ones that interest to the audience. So I can see there's about 200 people sort of roughly listening to this, attending this show this session right now. There are some changes that are for workers that come to work in the economics, where there's economic activities, very, very high threshold. Immigration has to be convinced that the key projects that you're going to be working on are going to be delayed because you can't get here. So there's very high bars for those. Then, Zinnia, is there anything else before I move on to the short and the long term?
Yeah, so with this one, so there's going to be two categories. One is essential workers, and this category always existed, and it's currently listed on immigration's website. It's called other essential workers. This is where the lead agency involvement is required, and it's quite a difficult process to get through. There's another one that's going to come out called significant economic activities. There's going to be separate to essential workers. And this one it will have a new process around it, and it will have a clear criteria that will be introduced to give employers and employees some peace of mind, and some clear instructions on what to follow. And the criteria would be, in order to be considered a key economic activity, it has to be related to a key project that will be delayed without the workers' presence, or that the economy would be significantly affected.
Yeah. And then the next one, which is the other essential worker space, is now being sort of split roughly into two parts. They're looking at the long-term worker role and the short-term roles. So the short-term is less than 6 months. There's obviously requirements in that area. There's a longer-term role, which is more than 6 months, and there's more stringent requirements in that area. If you want us to get into it, we will get into it, but I'm quite keen to sort of talk about also the people that are within New Zealand and that are getting stuck. Before we get into that, there is something that I do want to talk about. Now, often we obviously, and I can see the questions coming through, and it talks about people that are stuck, that ordinarily live in New Zealand and are stuck offshore. I just want you to hear this because the government has this, just about an hour and a half ago said this. The government is particularly looking at this issue, and we understand these people are in a difficult situation. We are limited by capacity to isolate and quarantine the new arrivals. We are working on border strategy focused on the longer-term management of New Zealand movement border settings. So I'm repeating this again, and I know there's a lot of frustration as to why you can't come in and why can't you pay for your quarantine. It's not as simple as that, and it is, I understand, absolutely frustrating. But those that are stuck offshore, if you don't fall into the criteria that we talk about, we will be posting the updates shortly. And if you want to receive continual updates, you're more than welcome to register to our newsletter on our website so you can get all of these changes.
Also, the newsletter that's about to go out, the one that we will be sending out either tonight or tomorrow morning will cover this in quite a bit of detail. So as to why these offshore workers aren't able to come in, because we've actually received clarity from the government now. So I would suggest that you subscribe to that, and you just have to let us know your email address, and we'll add you to the database.
Cool. Okay, so some of the significant changes for those people that are within New Zealand, and you know that there's a lot of PPI letters, requests for information that have gone out to employers, that have gone out to advisors, PPI letters, and people have panicked. Some, even at some instances where immigration has been incorrectly PPIing, and we've had some success, and people that are listening would probably agree where we have pushed back and we've got those visas approved as well. But in the larger percentage of people that are getting these these PPI requests, the immigration is requesting for retesting of the labor market. They haven't been using the word re-advertising until earlier this week. We can see the shift in terminology. There's different processes that are happening at this stage. So I think there's a few things that I want to tell those people. The first very, very important thing that we want to tell you guys is the SMR process is going to be changed as of Monday. So that's almost Monday, right, Zinnia?
Yeah. Yes.
So that's almost an instant change. What that means is, so if you are in a low skill occupation or you below the minimum required for essential skills, middle skills, you will need to advertise. So your position needs to be advertised with work and income. Zinnia, please take us through the changes that have happened with the SMR. And people, if you've got questions, we're more than happy to take these questions.
Yeah. So, so the skill match report process changes from Monday. MSD is bringing out, Ministry of Social Development is bringing out a new portal, which is available to more people. So how they're going to approach it is you would advertise the vacancy with work and income just how you would in normal days, like you do currently. If they have candidates to refer, if they have suitable candidates they wish to refer, they'll follow the current process that is in place. If they don't have suitable candidates to refer, they are going to advise the employer via email and ask the employer to advertise on the new portal. So it's almost like you go through a layer. So they're like, okay, we can't find you suitable candidates in this layer. Now go advertise on a new portal. So they only do that if they can't find suitable candidates in the first layer. But if they are able to find suitable candidates in the first layer, process is the same.
Yeah.
So that is the process change coming through on Monday. We will, once we've practically done it for our clients, then we are more in a position to advise how it actually looks. So probably by the, just keep an eye on our Facebook, we're putting some information there.
Yeah, I think two key things that I've noticed from here, actually three key things that I've noticed in here. One, there's an excessive use of word trainable. So if, we had seen previously that immigration was talking about all of these testing, the instructions have always had suitable and trainable as requirements in there for New Zealanders available for the role. But of late, we saw over many years, immigration wasn't really using the word trainable as much. It was my prediction about 3 weeks ago, and those listening that I've told this to you will agree that I told about 3 weeks ago that expect more use of the word trainable. And what that means is that now immigration is not just looking for those people that are suitable, but those people that are also readily trainable for the role. So there is a big difference in that space, and be very careful when you are treading on those waters for those skill match reports. The second thing that I want to tell you is that when you get a skill match report, the test is not just getting a skill match report. You can get a skill match report. The test is getting a favorable skill match report. Because if you get a skill match report that says 3 people referred to the employer, 0 hired, 0 or 2 or 3 people unsuccessful, and then it's got reasons underneath why they're unsuccessful, and then market intelligence underneath, which is not really convincing why those people were turned down by the employer, that's going to lead to an almost instant decline in your application. So you need to know what that skill match report means and how to use it and what to do with those people. So you need someone professionally advising you what needs to be done in that process. And I think the third thing that I want to tell you is, I've actually forgotten. I can't remember. I didn't write it down. But I think one of the things that just come to my mind is the advertising report that Zinnia has just talked about does require a number. So there's a number on that advertising report. I remember it. The third thing is the portal. So previously, people used to think that it's only people that are registered with work and income that can apply. The government is looking at increasing that portal to a wider audience. Now, there's obviously work being done in the background, so be very mindful of the skill match report space. I just want you to sort of park that really strong idea with people. Zinnia, anything else?
Yeah. I've just recently said there's a good example I can give. I've just signed up a client where recently where he's got a skill match report and it says 4 referred. So in the market intelligence portion at the bottom, it says 4 referred to the employer, no one hired due to lack of qualifications. And it's an ANSCO 4 role, retail supervisor. And when I spoke to the client and I saw the engagement they've had with work and income, they had told them no lack of experience, couldn't talk properly. Like the reasons in the interaction were legit, but somehow they kept saying, oh, this person doesn't have the qualifications along with the other reasons. And then WINS picked that up, wrote it in the report, and we have a PPI. It is very important what you tell immigration as well, WINS as well.
Yeah. I think the other thing, there's obviously lots of questions. I think maybe we should move to the questions. Yeah. I just want to, because so that we can take as many questions. There's people saying, thank you for being with us. Thank you guys for coming and listening. Absolutely share the session because we are giving you some pretty strong IP consultation right now, which you don't get freely. You normally pay quite a bit to advisors to get half wrong information. So we are giving that because I think that's what people need at this stage, because otherwise all of those visas are going to end up in a decline. I'm just trying to, let's talk about the labor market check. I think there's a question about the labor market check. They've talked about the job portal. Salap, we've just covered this question. We've just talked about this now. Yes, there's no student visas update. If you're talking, Sunil, if you're talking about student visas offshore, no update at this stage. Borders are closed. Student visas within New Zealand, they are processing. So onshore student visas, we've enrolled quite a few for the July intake. So they are moving. Zinnia, SMC updates.
Yeah, so it's funny that, in the newsletter, I've actually just got that exact part in there covered up in the newsletter as to what's happening with different visa categories. So with SMC updates, only the prioritized residence applications are moving. So those earning $51 or more per hour, or those requiring occupational registration, only those applications are moving. In fact, I've had a couple of my applicants already approved. They were on the high income 120K bracket. So they're already moving and they're actually getting decisions as well. So they're moving fast, whereas all of the other ones are quiet.
Yeah, just on that, Zinnia, I know that you and I haven't consulted. So you've got 2 very strong independent advisors giving advice. I know for a fact that I've spoken to quite a lot of clients in the last week and a bit. And from them and from some of our applications, there were December 2018. There's a little bit of movement in that space, even if you're not in that high threshold. So there's a huge backlog, but it's trickle feeding.
What was the movement? What was the movement?
The client received the PPI and he wanted us to take over his case.
Okay, so they're trickle feeding through the rest of the old ones because it's priority order, I guess, then. So December 2018 ones are now kind of being touched on.
Yeah, so I think they're looking at the priority order and then they'll start looking at the backlog as well. So I think they're going to work in those kind of silos, and we can see that movement happening there. What kind of services we provide? We provide everything except, we provide all sorts of services in the immigration space, education, career advice, all sorts of visas, except refugee status. Let's take this question from Aman. It says, I'm a chef and on essential skills work visa. Currently, I'm stuck over here in India. Is there any chance I can get back?
There's a lot of questions in here about work visas stuck offshore. So I think I'm just going to repeat that part because they probably would have joined in a little bit later. So those stuck offshore, there's no change in the scenario. The situation is still the same. The borders are still close to you, but there has been a little and a promising update where the minister has confirmed that the cabinet is working on decisions about these people right now. They are going to look at a bunch of criteria that they're going to consider before allowing stranded offshore work visa holders in, and that is again something that I have covered in the newsletter that will go out. But yeah, there is a bit of a criteria they're working through.
There's a question around Section 61 for partnership. Well, I can't advise you without knowing your case. you need to understand that the threshold for Section 61 has always been very, very high. Your case has to be exceptional. And without looking at the case, I can't really advise. We obviously are very careful with selecting applications. So we don't just sign up any Section 61 applications. We're very careful in what we select. And we've had considerable amount of success in doing these. But most of the Section 61 situations, our answer is normally no, and it's the end of the road for you. But I think on the Section 61, this quite nicely reminds me to remind people of something very, very important, which is the interim visas. A lot of you will be on your interim visas right now, or you might have your interim visas extended to the 25th of September, or you may just be getting onto your interim visas. There's something that you need to know quite carefully about interim visas. You all know about conditions of interim visas, that it changes from what visa you applied from and all of that. But I think one thing that people don't know, that when you go onto an interim visa, you can't apply for a visa of another type or class. And what that means is that, say you've got an essential skills application that's been sitting with immigration, it's under processing, they've asked for re-advertising of that position, maybe your employer is looking at re-advertising or is hesitant, and you're not too sure about that essential skills, and you're on interim visa space. We've had multiple clients in these situations, and COVID is, quite an exceptional situation that's happened to people. If that visa gets declined and you are on an interim visa, the only thing you can do is apply for a reconsideration within 14 days of a decline, because your interim visa remains valid for 21 days. You cannot apply for any other visa. I've got a lot of people who say, you know what, if this gets declined, we'll become a student, we'll apply for a student visa. You cannot do a student visa or any other visa when on interim visa. And the moment you finish an interim visa, you become unlawful and you go on to a Section 61. So that's, if you are in this situation and you think your application is dicey and it's, rocky waters, please contact us, because there are ways and things that we can do to try and not have that decline. We've done this for a few clients. It's obviously something that we do within AIMS, and I don't want to openly talk about it, but if you've got those cases, absolutely tell us, but don't take the interim visa for granted, because a number of people tell us this is quite shocking. Zinnia, do you have anything to add on the interim?
I have a question for you, and I think the audience might be interested in that. When you're applying, say you're on essential skill work visa, you were feeling it's going to get declined because SMI is not favorable. They want to do, and say they do end up getting a decline, they want to do a reconsideration. What if they want to apply for a visitor visa in the reconsideration?
Yeah. And that's exactly what I mean, that it's not a standard. So normally on a reconsideration, you can't apply for another type, but there is something called in immigration, which is called exception to instructions. And that is truly an exceptional case when you can use this. And like I said, Zinnia, you are asking us to tell people what we do internally. And I think that's a paid service. So we need to be a bit careful what we say.
Yes,
but absolutely, we should.
Yeah, it is about, at that point, exception to instructions. It's almost like you cannot do that without representation. Yeah.
And my strong advice is that try and avoid a decline if you can, because there are things that we can do, even if your employer is not advertised, to try and look at a plan B for you, because now is the time that a lot of people need to have plan B. And if that plan B is that if this goes downhill, I'm going to go back home, wherever your home may be, that's fine. But just have that understanding. Moving along.
I think I'll just quickly mention this as well. I've seen a lot of questions come through on amendment bill. What's happening with the visa conditions, entry, all of that amendment. So amendment bill was passed about a month ago. It was actually 15th of May when it got its royal assent. Nothing. It's quiet in that space. So just so everybody asking knows that. Yeah.
Oh, there's a lot of questions. I'm just trying to see where we're going to pick up so we're not repeating our content. So there's people. So guys that are stuck offshore, unfortunately, there's not much more relief that I can give you. So don't get carried away. And I know that I'm to be honest, if you've seen my posts, political posts, I am absolutely furious why the government can't just come and say no or something concrete, and why there's miscommunication and different messages coming in, because I absolutely understand that it is playing with people's lives and people are really anxious at this stage, but don't fall into rumors, because there is no relief at this stage. Let's keep going. Open work visa stuck offshore. Right? Okay, so it's all offshore.
There's a good question here from Nidhi. She says, does open work visa holders stuck offshore have to be worried as they aren't connected to jobs when compared to essential work visa holders? Nidhi, actually, that's a in somewhat way a better situation, because essential work visa holders, if they're in India and they've lost their job, they cannot travel back on that visa because that visa is tied to that job. Whereas open work visa holders are not tied to a job. Means
Yeah,
if you've got the visa and it's valid, you can come in when
but
borders open.
I'm gonna take this, and I know exactly where this is coming from, because I know there's a lot of speculation in the market from other practitioners who have said that they think that people that are on open work visas will be worse off because they don't have something to come back to because they've studied. At this stage, Nidhi, and anyone else that's listened to the other practitioners saying this, I've been repeatedly saying, don't go on something that's not been announced. There is absolutely no announcement on any of this. So there's no point that you boil your blood over something that hasn't happened. It's purely speculation. And I am, to be honest, I am advising all practitioners out there that may be listening that please do not get these people even more panicked by telling them what you think may happen, because people only should consider facts at this stage. So Nidhi, just confirming, there's absolutely no announcements from the government on what's going to happen to those people on open work visas or essential skills, if they're going to be worse off or better off. There's a lot of speculations, and if I know where you've got this from, it's purely speculation. There is nothing published around it. What about EOIs? Zinnia, do you want to take this? Because there's a lot of questions around EOIs that are is immigration accepting them, or what's happening?
Okay, yeah, so just read out the question, because I kind of don't know where we are in this, because there's so many have built up.
That's so, right. Just saying what's happening to EOIs, and there's multiple questions, so I'm just compiling them together.
With expression of interest, you can submit them still, but there's no selection taking place. Amendment bill is meant to give us more information around that, but at the moment we haven't got anything. So the system is still physically allowing you to submit an EOI, but there is no selection taking place, and we don't know when that will start.
Sure. There's a question here from Thanuj. Is there any changes for open work visa holders who still have jobs? There is no changes announced for open work visas. Zinnia, correct me if I'm wrong. Whether you have a job or not is irrelevant. There are no changes announced for your space. Zinnia, a quick update, if you can just repeat the update on spouse dependent visas quickly for temporary and New Zealand residents, for people that are asking that question now.
Okay, so for if you are a partner or a dependent child of a New Zealand citizen or resident, in the past, you had to physically travel with them, cross the border physically with your New Zealander partner. But with the new policy that's coming into effect end of next week, if you can now cross the border without them, as long as you meet one of these two conditions. Condition number one, that you were ordinarily resident in New Zealand. Condition number two, you already hold a relationship-based visa with your New Zealander partner. So that's the only change. Whereas for temporary visa holders, partners of temporary visa holders, the condition is you must be ordinarily resident in New Zealand. That means you were living in New Zealand before you left the country, and you can cross the border.
Yeah. There's one more thing that I just sort of need to sort of add here. I know that there's been, and I think, look, media has been publishing a lot of stuff that's out there. A lot of it is speculation as well. At the end of the day, the media does need those clicks. I've just before the session started, read a piece that someone, one of our, someone on a South African group had shared, where some industries like dairy and farming are requesting for extension or auto extension on their workers' visas. And there was an article saying that may happen. Now, I just want to confirm that that's not happened yet. And that's exactly what I mean. There's so much that's out there around what may or may not happen. Please keep your calm. Only rely on facts. Read the material. We will be publishing these things, and there's always a source to what we publish. People are asking about visa expiry dates. So people that are stuck offshore and the visas have expired, the first entry before. If you did attend our last session, we talked about the amendment bill. And like Zinnia said, the amendment bill was passed a month ago. And one of my colleagues has very fantastically told me, and this sort of helps to explain the idea, that that's like giving the minister a remote control with a whole lot of powers, and what buttons that minister is going to press and when the minister is going to press is something that's unknown. Thank you, Mahek, because I've stolen that from you. So I think that's what people do need to completely understand, that the amendment bill has been passed, and that was passed exactly for this purpose. So it is so annoying and disappointing and heartbreaking that, it's taken the government so long to even say anything, but that's where it is. So there is no announcement in that space. Okay. So I think there's a client of ours asking something about visa extended September. Zinnia, do you want to take this openly or take it up with the client? I'm not too sure.
Um,
Otherwise, because we've got lots of questions to get through.
Ramandeep, I'll text you tonight.
So I work in a retail clothing as an assistant store manager, and my visa expires in December. 1 year is going to be a store manager coming month. So wondering if I'll be able to get a 3-year visa. And I think that's a perfect topic because that was definitely a topic I was going to cover. And I will let Zinnia sort of complete the section, but I do want to start off by telling people something. So when you are applying, so say you are on an essential skills, maybe you've been on 3-year essential skills, or you've been on a 1 year and you're looking at upskilling or going on to another 1 year or 3 years. What you need to understand is that the market that was existent in New Zealand prior to COVID, prior to March, is very different to what it is now. And when I say that, I mean that the unemployment rates in New Zealand are soaring. What that means is that now when an employer puts an ad, either to work on income or on TradeMe or on Seek, you need to remember that do you have any specialist skills or any skills that a New Zealander who was previously not interested in the role just because they didn't want to do it can now get up and do. And I often tell people when they tell me that, I'm now becoming a retail manager and I'm going to work in a store and I'm working in a superette or a liquor store or a restaurant or whatever, my question is, I'm a New Zealand citizen, can I get up and do your role? If I do not have a job today, can I get up and do your job? If the answer is no, because you need late night shifts and you require a general manager license or you require road ranger, experience in driving those trucks, so something really specific, then maybe you're filtering out the audience. But if the answer is no, because you are looking after a retail store, then you know the answer because you are going to be bombarded with CVs from either TradeMe, Seek, or through Work and Income. And we've seen that happening. Zinnia, can you just tell quickly about, how that market's playing up? Because we've got these advertising, adverts that are running right now.
Yeah, so I think one of the things is that one thing that the employers are making, and a big mistake is what they do is they're putting up the experience requirements. So they're like, we want a lot of experience, and we want we want you to have a bachelor's degree in this field, and we want you to have 5 years experience. We're going to pay you $22 an hour. So I think it doesn't marry it up, like it doesn't work. So generic, mostly like business type roles, like just the ones generic management type roles where you do not need special licenses or special qualifications like you do normally for like liquor space. You are getting bombarded with New Zealanders, and hospo is being exceptionally hit very hard. Anybody working in hospitality has been, if you put out an advert, you'll see a massive amount of New Zealanders applying, massive amount of redundancies in this space as well.
Yeah. And I can see there's a lot of questions that are coming around what I think the future is going to be, what's going to happen to long-term skill shortage list, what's going to happen to people that are, for those of you that are joining us late, we have covered the changes that have been announced today. We've covered that at the start of the session. So once this video is done, I strongly urge you to go back and sort of review it. If you've got questions, and come back to us. Now, what I think about what the future is going to be or what the long-term skill shortage is going to look like is sort of beside the point, because that's not something that you can base your life decisions on. But if you take a step back and think about it, there are many positions that are in the skill shortages, which may no longer be because the whole market's shifting. Or maybe, after the storm is past, we realize that there are certain markets that the government thinks that New Zealanders will fill, but in reality, New Zealanders don't want to fill. That's only something that time will tell. So just, just be mindful of making sure that speculation and opinion is quite different to facts. I am very happy to do a opinion piece if you ever want, but this is purely about facts. Okay, so I think there's a really good point someone's commented, but so Zinnia's, I'll just come to the question, but there's someone has said New Zealand needs to look after Kiwis before letting any immigrants in, and any money that the government hands out should go to Kiwis. So I think I am a New Zealander, but I'm also a migrant. And I have very strong opinions because I can see there's very strong opinions. In fact, to the extent in some groups, I can see them sort of talking about borderline racism. And I do not absolutely encourage that. You need to understand that what's happening in the country needs to look after their own first. I absolutely understand that. But at the same time, there needs to be a balance. So what I've been saying that this is a very delicate balance that the government needs to strike. And often governments have got this wrong. There needs to be a very delicate balance between immigration and the national interest. Migrants are required in certain areas where New Zealanders cannot fill those gaps. And if you talk to those employers that have kept those positions open because the migrants are stuck offshore and they can't find anybody else, it'll take them 4 years to train someone else to do the role. You'll understand when people say that. So I completely appreciate your comment. It's not so much as just handing money out to migrants. And even for migrants, it's not so much the government's, treating you and there's racism here. There is a lot more to it. And you kind of need to look into the situation a bit deeper to appreciate it. Yes, I absolutely agree that communication should have been a lot clearer and consistent, but I would strongly encourage people to not encourage any sort of racism happening in the space. So let's just try and be calm and rational around where we kind of see this going.
I think I'm just going to quickly touch upon the two categories for workers that could come in. I think it's at a point where I'm just going to take that part again. So announced 2 hours ago is a new category called significant economic activities. That is the name that has been given to it as of yet. And it is more details will come out through the course of the week. It will go live. It'll go live end of next week. So significant economic activities allows those employers who really need employees to have time sensitive work done on critical key projects. That means projects would be delayed if that employee is not here, or the economy would be quite substantially affected. And in this space, the employers may have to fund the managed isolation for these employees. That's all we know at this point, and I'm sure that more information will come out. Immigration has said very clear criteria for this category will be introduced.
And there will also be a fees coming for this expression of interest. If it's employer supported, it's in the range of about $250 to $400 or something. And if it's individual, then it's about $30 to $50. So there will be some more announcements coming in here. I do want to talk about students because I can see there's a lot of questions from people that are talking about education. One, the July intake will not happen for people that are stuck offshore. The borders are closed. So there will be no July intakes. There are student visas that are being processed from people that are within New Zealand. The next thing that I want you to know is a very important thing, because there are students that had visas in New Zealand that are stuck offshore. And I know that you are studying with providers online. You do need to be absolutely careful, because if you do want to avail your post-study work visas, you still need to meet the minimum 30 weeks full-time education requirements in New Zealand. So, and make sure that if it's the larger universities and the providers, they all know that. If it's the smaller ones, and make sure that you don't end up finishing the whole qualification when you're there, because there could be ramifications, and you may be adversely affected and you may not get those post studies. So be very careful in those areas.
I want to take a question from Karen here. And she asks that my visa just expired 1 week ago and I'm unable to return. I left all my belongings with important documents in the room I'm still paying for. And I'm assuming, Karen, these are belongings that are in New Zealand and that room is in New Zealand. That means you were normally living in New Zealand and you left and the visa expired while you left. I'll wait for your clarity comment and then I will come back to it. I do want to know when your visa expired and also why it expired. Did it just run out, or there was an entry date you couldn't meet? Something like that.
Yeah. I'm trying to find a question. Sorry, there's so many questions. If we have missed your question and it hasn't been answered, please just do ask it again. We still have about another 5 minutes or so to go through before we finish the session. While we're waiting on this, I do also want to talk about skilled work experience, because that is something that I've talked about a lot in the last week. People think that, they had 3 years essential skills granted, say as a marketing manager, but they're actually working in an admin position, and they want to apply for residence. They want to claim their skilled work experience points. You need to be very careful here, because just because you've got the 3-year essential skills doesn't mean that experience is automatically going to be considered as skilled and you will get the points. When the residence application is put in, you will have to give the evidence of how you are performing those tasks that match with the marketing manager, how you perform those skilled tasks. And by the time you asked for this evidence, you could possibly be 18 months, 24 months down the track. So people do need to be very aware that if you are actually not doing that role and it's an inflated role and your role is something else, just be careful before you get onto that skilled migrant pathway. Zinnia, are the EOIs being selected at this stage? So the minister had, are they being? Can people submit them?
So yeah, the system is allowing submission at the moment. So it was as of like yesterday, but it just they're not being selected. If you go with, again, it would be speculating. If you go with amendment bill and you count 3 months, because it's maximum 3 months suspension was allowed at any one time. That's what the amendment bill said. So you count the time when it was initially suspended to when those 3 months would be up is sometime in July. But again, that is just speculation because technically the system never stopped. So we can't say. We just have to wait. You can still submit it. So for those that want to submit it, can still submit it. I don't know if the system will close tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I've obviously told people, and this has been purely my own opinion, that if you are eligible and you think you've got a strong application, submit as soon as possible, because when they do open, we know that they will move either through that priority queue or they will move through first come first serve. So get them into the queue if you're eligible. So I'm just seeing there's more questions coming through. God, wow, there's quite a few of them. Daljit is saying, essential work visa onshore who lost jobs or will, once the subsidy turn out, what are the future for them in New Zealand? And as if we inform the immigration, they are putting us on interim visa, and once we are on that, we can't apply for work of another type. Better not to inform them, because I don't quite understand, Daljit. I think you've written that really quickly. I have read your post, so I know your English is way better. Can you please type that again? Because what I understand from what you're saying is that you're on an interim visa, subsidies running out, people can't work. It's a very dire situation, which is exactly what I'm telling people, that we can't change what is today. I mean, I know that through my other roles, there's a lot of background work that's been going on. It is an election year. It is very political at this stage, the whole immigration scene. There's a lot of factors that need to be looked into account. And, we've come this far to achieving what we have as a country. And, we are really sought after. So there's a lot of factors at play. So that's why we're telling people that be careful with your planning. Don't just sort of wait for that work visa if you think it's going to fall into the trap. Have a plan B. So Zinnia, I have a level 1 job and pay rate 40 hours. Pay rate 40 hours, I don't know. Can I get a residence in 5-year visa? Can you just quickly talk about high threshold and how people can get a 5-year visa?
So to get a 5-year visa, you need to earn $38.50 and above per hour for a 5-year visa. So I think that's kind of the key thing, is that's kind of what you need to do. Without that, it's not even it doesn't matter what ANSCO you are, as long as you meet the salary threshold.
Yeah. Another one here, it says, how can they call more students when there is no future certainty for them and hope for existing migrants who stayed in New Zealand more than 7 years? Totally unfair. Honestly, migrants need to be looked at. I agree with very strongly agree with the latter part of what you say, which is that, people that have been here, they've worked their lives and now they're just stuck. They do need to be looked after. And I only wish that there was something that I could do to make it happen faster or have it in a safer way, but we can't. But I think because we do also do a lot of student visas, for New Zealand. Student visa getting a work visa is not a guarantee product that you get when you come on a student visa. So I have to say this because, I have to kind of balance it on both sides. So you don't just automatically assume that you're going to get a work visa when you come to New Zealand. There's ways. So students can be offered pathways to work visas. So I think that's something that we need to remember when we take these arguments to the government, because they're going to be pushed back. There's one here from Sue. It says, my first entry date lapsed on the 28th of May, and I have 1 year to enter. The visa I was granted was mid-skilled as senior auditor and for a big accounting firm. How long until there is a possibility for people in my position?
So for this one, I'm going to talk about this. I would suggest if you just go and listen to this again. I have talked about a few times about this new category that has been announced today called significant economic activities. The criteria is yet to come through. Like, we haven't got an announcement on that criteria yet, but immigration has confirmed that it is for people working in key projects, that their presence or their absence would actually delay those key projects for the employer, or the economy would be significantly impacted. Very clear criteria will be introduced for this aspect. So I would suggest just keep a very close eye on our Facebook page, because I am expecting drip feed of like different segments, announcements coming through, and I'm actually expecting a lot of updated Facebook posts going through next week as for each and every segment.
Yeah. And maybe even sign up for our newsletter if you can, to sort of stay on. Zinnia, can you take the next one as well? It ties in, which is nurses. Any chance nurses can come 4-year experience? What need to do? I don't quite understand, but probably the question is, any chances nurses can come in?
Nurses are an essential worker, essential health worker.
So you need to have a job offer in New Zealand.
Yeah, so if you're an essential health worker, because their nurses are already listed in the essential health worker space, and if you have a job offer in New Zealand, yeah, you can come back. The only thing with that is that, of course, there's all of these registration requirements that would have to be met with the nursing council and all of that. So that probably needs a little bit more exploration. I don't really know what exactly that question is.
Paramveer, how long residence is going to take from here on? We don't quite know. Like we just talked about it, that there's some trickle feeding of applications from late 2018 that's happening now. I'm hoping that wouldn't be the time frame, and the next 6 months things would pick up. It's very hard to say what it's going to be, but at this stage there's huge delays. Ramidu, I don't quite know why there's a question mark. If I've missed your question, please do ask it again. We are going to be wrapping up this session. Well, we've kind of gone for 45 minutes, but we are going to be wrapping up soon. Danya says, I'm on a work visa, getting only subsidy at this time. My visa needs to renew in August, and I already applied for residence. Is there any chance to get my visa extended?
You're gonna have to read that out for me again. I can't. I don't know whether I can't see the question.
Oh, sure. Sorry. So Danya is saying that she's on a work visa and she's only getting subsidy at the moment, and her visa runs out in August and she needs to renew it, and she's already applied for residence. Is there any chance she can apply for her visa extension?
So if you've already applied for your residence, you can file an essential skills for 1 year without advertising. But the tricky part with that is you're not meeting essential skills requirements at the moment because you're only on wage subsidy. So it just depends what the situation with you and your employer would be in August when you're coming close to expiry of your visa. But there is a policy that allows you, if your residence is still in process, you can file an essential skills without advertising and you'll get it for 1 year.
Yeah. So guys, there's obviously lots of questions, not everything that we can get through. Thank you for asking all of these questions and coming to hear us. We will try and do another session on another Friday if we can. It takes obviously quite a bit of effort, but I'm very happy to speak to you. We might even do one next Friday. One of the things that I just do want to leave as comments. Migrants are absolutely very important to New Zealand. There are some pockets that cannot be filled in by New Zealanders for various reasons. There are migrants that are stuck offshore, and there's migrants that are within New Zealand that need help. What all we can do from our end, which is what we've been doing since the lockdown ever happened, is we've been offering free advice. And those of you that have spoken to us, they will know that we've been talking to people, as many people that we possibly can, and give you clarity so you can make a sensible decision. But those people that did come here on those low-level, courses, or those courses or pathways that don't really have a future in New Zealand, you do need to think really carefully with what's happened. With COVID, it's quite a unique situation because everybody in the world has been affected in one way or the other. And I think we are really lucky to be living in a country where we've obviously had a lot of other losses, but at least lives are saved. And I think that's quite an important thing to remember. There's a lot of people that are looking at upskilling themselves, getting into different fields, all of that stuff. So, just try and think. And if you need any questions or anything that you specifically need answered, you know exactly where to reach us. Zinnia, do you have any closing comments?
Yeah, I probably first have to apologize. There was a bit of noise disturbance on my end. That was just my dog shaking and asking for dinner. But I do have to at this point state that, today's announcement was really big. That came from immigration. It was big and it gave us insight into what's going to come, which means more announcements are going to come. And it could be for different categories, a small email here, an announcement there. So it's a lot easier to keep everybody updated if you just keep an eye on our Facebook page, because we are adding posts as soon as they come. And at the end of the week, we are wrapping all of those key changes in form of a newsletter. So there's one going out, which will cover everything today, everything from today as well. So, and it might answer a lot of questions in one place. So if you need to register for our newsletter, you just have to private message us, because I will be on Facebook after this.
Or you go onto our website and you can register.
Yes, you go onto our website and you can register, but I will be on Facebook for a while after this. If any private messages are coming through, so I can reply to them. And yeah, just contact us if you need any help. And I think that's it. That's us
Yeah.
for a Friday evening.
Guys,
And
take care. Those of you offshore, just hang in there. I know lives are affected. And if there's anything that we can help with, you know exactly where to reach us. Take care and have a good weekend.
have a
Thanks,
good
guys.
night.